Good morning, everyone. I'd first like to acknowledge that I'm addressing you from the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. We honor the people and the land of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. I'm joined here today by Yavar Hamid, Ottawa-based human rights lawyer, Sam Hirsch, with Independent Jewish Voices, and my lawyer, Alexi Wood, partner at St. Lawrence Barristers, PC. My name is Birgit Dattani. I am a human rights professional with a long history of fighting for justice for the most marginalized. From 2020 to 2023, I was the director of the Yukon Human Rights Commission, and before that, I spent 3 years as the assistant regional director of the Alberta Human Rights Commission. Towards the end of May 2022, a senior official with Justice Canada sought me out and invited me to apply for the role of Chief Commissioner of the Canadian Human Rights Commission. In June 2024, after a lengthy and rigorous application and vetting process spanning nearly 2 years and glowing recommendations from my previous employers, I was appointed Chief Commissioner of the Canadian Human Rights Commission by the Governor-General on the recommendation of the Justice Minister. I was set to begin my role on August 8th, 2024, and would become the first person of color and the first Muslim to hold this prestigious position. I felt honored, humbled, and excited for the opportunity and the prospect of bringing real and meaningful changes to the Commission at a critical moment, while also advocating for Canadians, particularly those from marginalized backgrounds who face discrimination. On August 12th, 2024, 4 days after my role was set to begin, I announced my resignation as Chief Commissioner. Shortly after my appointment was announced in June, I became the subject of a vicious smear campaign, painting me as a terrorist supporter and an anti-Semite. These comments led to a third-party investigation. Ultimately, the investigators released a report that found the allegations of anti-Semitism, bias against Jewish people or Israelis, and terrorism support and/or sympathy to be unfounded. That report is publicly available. Despite the report's unequivocal conclusion on these points, the vicious public attacks by a number of groups and individuals persisted in the following days and weeks. That's why I'm here today to announce that I have launched defamation lawsuits against those who spearheaded a targeted attack against me this past summer. Conservative Member of Parliament Melissa Lantsman, right-wing media personality Ezra Levant, and the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, CIJA. If I may direct your attention to the monitor, on the same day the report came out, the Deputy Leader of the Conservatives, Member of Parliament Melissa Lantsman, reacted by posting, "Anti-Semites should hold no position in Canada's government." This tweet was viewed over 44,000 times. It was retweeted more than 700 times and liked more than 2,500 times. It was also quoted in an article by the CBC. In October, 2 months after the report was published, Ezra Levant called me a, quote, Islamic extremist who praised terrorism as a tactic against Jews, end quote. This tweet was viewed almost 46,000 times and liked 1,300 times. These aren't even the worst things that have been said about me over the last 8 months. The statements of claim are now public. They list many more examples of the defamatory statements that were shared far and wide. I cannot sufficiently underscore the impact that this vicious campaign has had on me over the past few months. It has caused serious and potentially irreparable damage to my reputation. It has impacted my mental and physical health. It has also affected my family and loved ones. I'm taking this step today to reclaim my reputation and to seek accountability for the damage that has been done to me and those closest to me. Je ne saurais trop insister sur l'impact que cette campagne vicieuse a eu sur moi au cours des derniers mois. Cela a causé des dommages graves et potentiellement irréparable à ma réputation. Ça a eu une impact sur mon santé mentale et physique. Ça a aussi affecté ma famille et les êtres chers. Je prends cette mesure aujourd'hui pour restaurer ma réputation et de demander des comptes pour les dommages qui ont été causés à moi et à mes êtres chers les plus proches. Most importantly, my story represents an episode in a wider phenomenon of hateful attacks which have done tremendous damage to many people across this country. Medical professionals, educators, academics, and journalists, parenthetically, often from marginalized and racialized backgrounds, have borne the brunt of a campaign of defamation, bullying, intimidation, and silencing, which has cost many their livelihoods. This trend often starts with allegations, which then lead to doxing, bullying, pressure campaigns on employers, then investigations. On many occasions, perhaps even in most cases, these investigations find the allegations to be baseless. But the damage is already done. Too often, these baseless allegations are accompanied by bigoted, Islamophobic, anti-Palestinian, or anti-Arab tropes, such as being terrorist sympathizers, harboring religiously extremist views, and holding quote-unquote un-Canadian values. It is dangerous to assert that academic research, being critical of a government, attending protests, and simply having a Muslim name are reasons for suspicion. That is un-Canadian. Normalizing these stereotypes not only harms reputations, it can also have negative impacts on the psychological and physical safety of their targets and the wider community to which they belong. We have witnessed the deadly impacts of Islamophobia here in Canada time and again. With the Afzal family murders in London, Ontario in 2021, the fatal Quebec mosque shooting of January 29, 2017, and numerous incidents of Muslims being verbally abused, spat on, and women having their hijabs ripped off. Shamefully, Canada remains one of the deadliest countries for Islamophobic hate crimes in the G7. I stand here today on behalf of the countless others who have been targeted but who lack the resources to seek justice. It is expensive to litigate, and I'm crowdsourcing funds to help pay for this legal process. I want to take this opportunity to thank the many people who have supported me during these difficult times. They represent a large swathe of the Canadian population and are from many backgrounds and faith traditions. I particularly wish to thank the members of the Jewish and Israeli communities who have supported and defended me these past few months. To be clear, anti-Semitism is real, full stop. It is dangerous, insidious, and pervasive, and has increased significantly in Canada since October 7th, 2023. As a human rights advocate, I will continue to fight against anti-Semitism. I will also continue to fight against Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian racism, which have also increased. And I will continue to fight against all forms of hate and bigotry. That is my job. I'm here today to send a message. Those who use their platforms and positions to spew hate and misinformation must face accountability for their actions, which have real consequences. These dangerous actions cannot go without recourse. Every one of us has an inherent right to live free from discrimination. We also have a right to defend ourselves when faced with allegations like the ones that are the subject of this litigation. Thank you. I'd now like to invite my lawyer, Alexi Wood, to the podium.
Thank you, Birju. Good morning. I am Alexi Wood, the founding lawyer of St. Lawrence Barristers. We act for Mr. Dattani in these claims. I became familiar with Mr. Dattani's case last year. I didn't know him at that time, but I knew his employment lawyer, Maniza Sheikh, and read about the investigation that Mr. Dattani has referenced. That investigation was conducted by a third party. It resulted in a thorough 200-page document And I'd like to read some quotes from that are found at pages 34 and 35. First, and I quote, "Based on Mr. Dattani's evidence, the scholarship that was reviewed and provided, we cannot find that Mr. Dattani harbored or harbors any beliefs that would be characterized as anti-Semitic, or that he has demonstrated biases, conscious or unconscious, towards Jews or Israelis." End quote. The report continues, "He has not demonstrated any intentions or actions that suggest he is anti-Semitic or has beliefs that could be characterized as anti-Semitic." And then the last quote, "In his comments on anti-Semitism, Mr. Dattani demonstrated a high degree of self-awareness and sensitivity to the current challenges faced by the Jewish community in Canada, as well as a commitment to continue to learn about the challenges in the future." The report's conclusions are clear and bear repeating. Mr. Dattani is not now, and never has been, anti-Semitic. He is not biased, consciously or unconsciously, towards Jewish people or Israelis. Despite these clear findings, the three defendants named in our lawsuit continue to call Mr. Dattani anti-Semitic and make inflammatory, false statements that have now been seen by thousands of people. Freedom of expression is an essential foundation of our democracy. People are absolutely entitled to freedom of expression. They are entitled to hold opinions. They are entitled to question government. As with all freedoms, there are limits. One limit is defamation law, which makes it unlawful to make false statements that lower the reputations of others. People are not entitled to state as fact things that are not true. Mr. Dattani's claims present statements made by Melissa Lantsman, Ezra Levant, and the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs that, especially in light of the investigation, cannot be factually substantiated. That makes these statements defamatory. We are here today because the defendants' actions have had a devastating impact on Mr. Dattani, and the defendants must be held accountable. But we are also here because it is particularly damaging when the individuals making these defamatory statements hold positions of power, are public officials, or hold a large public following. We live in an era where disinformation is rampant and ubiquitous, when elected officials, media commentators, and advocacy groups ignore the truth and perpetuate lies. There is a more insidious and damaging impact, not only to the individuals, but to the fabric of our society. I'd like to now invite Sam Hirsch with Independent Jewish Voices before I take some questions.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Sam Hirsch, and I'm here on behalf of Independent Jewish Voices, or IJV. IJV is a national organization with 25 chapters from coast to coast that is grounded in a long and proud history of Jewish social justice activism. IJV opposes all forms of racism, including anti-Semitism, anti-Palestinian racism, and Islamophobia, and advocates for justice and peace for all in Israel, Palestine, and beyond. We are proud to be here today in solidarity with human rights champion Birju Dattani and wholeheartedly condemn the egregious attacks on his character. As Mr. Dattani has said, anti-Semitism is real, pervasive, disgusting, and has been increasing steadily worldwide. It is horrible. Calling someone anti-Semitic when it's not true is also horrible. Falsely calling someone anti-Semitic undermines its meaning. The ordeal that Mr. Dattani has gone through is a prime example of the dangers associated with weaponized anti-Semitism claims, which we're so often seeing utilized as a tool to limit activism and criticism around the Israeli state. In the world of these bad faith actors, even the International Criminal Court issuing warrants for the arrest of Israeli leaders amounts to anti-Semitism. To be clear, there is nothing wrong or anti-Semitic about criticizing Israel's human rights record, supporting the Palestinian right to self-determination, or researching international law as it relates with Palestine. Suggesting otherwise smacks of anti-Palestinian racism and double standards. But that is precisely what groups like CIJA, politicians like Melissa Lantsman, and so-called journalists like Ezra Levant revel in. We know that the safety of Jews cannot and does not come at the expense of Palestinians. This is why it's so important for us and our organization as Canadian Jews to support Dattani's case today. Victory for him in these cases would be a win for all who support human rights, defend freedom of expression, and intend to continue fighting anti-Semitism alongside the fight for justice, peace, and freedom for the Palestinian people. Thank you.
I'll take a couple of questions on behalf of my client.
What message are you hoping to send by filing these lawsuits?
There are a couple of messages that we are hoping to send with these lawsuits. First, we are focused on holding people accountable when they have continued to make false statements against Mr. Dattani, even in the face of a third-party investigation that concluded that Mr. Dattani is not now and never has been anti-Semitic. As both Mr. Dattani and Mr. Hirsch have said, anti-Semitism is real, dangerous, and pervasive. It has increased in Canada and worldwide in the last few years. Calling someone anti-Semitic is appropriately a serious accusation. Falsely calling someone anti-Semitic is defamatory.
This question is for Mr. Dattani. I don't know if he can take this.
I'm taking questions on his behalf.
So why did he resign?
We're not here today to talk about the investigation and the resignation. That report is public, and Mr. Dattani has made a statement which can be referenced on his LinkedIn. As I said, we're here today to focus on the lawsuits that we have launched and holding people accountable when they have made false statements about his character.
You quoted from that report,
Yes.
which clearly said that nothing from his past or his statements can be characterized as anti-Semitic, this outside law firm. So it is unclear as to, why he stepped aside, and you did refer to it, so.
As I said, we're not here today to talk about the investigation and the resignation. There is a statement on Mr. Dattani's LinkedIn that addresses his resignation.
I'm curious. I mean, have you seen, or have you, just in preparing this defamation lawsuit, other instances where people have taken on federal politicians for comments that they've made on social media or in other forms of media, and have been successful? Is there other precedence, is essentially for defamation cases against politicians, is what I'm asking.
Simply by virtue of being a politician does not shield you from defamation litigation. There is a difference in defamation law between statements that are made as part of parliamentary obligations and duties that are made in the House, for example. Those are treated differently than statements that are made outside of the bounds of the public office. And in our view, the statements that have been made and that are at issue here were not made as part of MP Lantsman's official duties.
Well, I guess maybe to better phrase the question, how common is it for someone to pursue a lawsuit or defamation against a politician? Is that uncommon?
I don't think I can answer that question.
Do you feel like your client was supported by the Liberal government while he was facing this backlash?
Again, we're not here to talk about the past. We're here today to talk about the litigation that we have launched now.
For journalists that joined on Zoom, if you have a question, please use the raise hand function. Si des journalistes en ligne ont une question, s'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction main levée. Thank you. This concludes.
I have a couple more questions. Have you closed the door on pursuing legal action against the federal government?
That, I mean, that was addressed with the investigation in the past. We are not involved in that. We're here as Mr. Dattani's civil litigators. Has nothing to do with the employment matter.
There will be no legal action against the federal government in the way that they've handled this.
I can't speak to what might happen in the future, but again, we are here as Mr. Dattani's civil litigators to deal with defamation that was brought by private individuals.
As a statement of defense, or have you received any response from the defendants?
We have not received any response yet. That's not uncommon. We would not have really expected to receive a response at this stage. It's very early. The 3 defendants have been served. We did see in the media that CIJA has issued a response, but we have not heard anything directly.
Finally, how quickly will this proceed? How long does something like this usually takes to go through the court?
Our litigation system is quite slow. There can be many different off-ramps at various stages, just in general, with any litigation. So it would probably be a few months before we see a statement of defense, and then the litigation process will proceed as it normally would.
Thank you. This concludes the press conference. Merci, c'est ce qui conclut la conférence de presse.